All right, I think we've got all that.
Yeah, we had a couple,
Things done. Let's move to the next, the affirm regular and committee of the whole meeting dates, 2019-2020 school board meeting calendar. The dates are on page 39 of the board book. I would like to open this to discussion.
so in board book on page 39, you'll see the giant draft. Sometimes is Mike's there. They know how to zoom in on the Chromebook, so if the font's kind of small, we can show them real quick how to zoom in.
Just type in 39 to go right to it.
Oh, show me that trick. How to do that?
Like go mouse over the top,
Oh, okay.
and then you'll see the page numbers, and then just mouse over it, and you
Tom,
can
you
go
need any
right to
help over there?
39.
No, he's got-
Type in 39 right on the
Pro.
keyboard, and then on the right.
That's what I do all day.
Gotcha.
I think we're all.
Okay, thank you.
Device, right?
Yep.
Yeah, it'd be a Google file.
Okay, so traditionally, the school board has met on Tuesdays. You'll see that there's 6 months out of the year where you only have one meeting. It's just called a regular meeting or a business meeting. Any standing items that were normally on a committee of the whole meeting in those months where there's only one meeting are combined into that agenda. There's 6 months when there is a committee of the whole meeting, and the idea behind the committee of the whole is more of transparency and discussion. It's an opportunity for the superintendent and the administration to report out, whether it's on information from advisory council meetings or from projects the building administration is working on, and eventually we'll need board approval or reports or information or data the board, a majority of the board has asked for. So a lot of good work takes place at the committee of the whole meeting. Traditionally, these meetings have been held at 7 p.m. and I think that was all the information. You know, Mary Ann had put, I had her put a red note about the start time. There are on occasion times when, whether it's a collective negotiation matter or a student, maybe discipline matter, possibly we have a vendor like an architect or an engineer, someone speaking on a project. Sometimes it's more convenient to have an earlier, like to start the meeting at 6:30 and go right into closed session so that we can get some of that information and not have to pay our consultants to stay around till 8:30, 9:30, whenever that the regular board meeting is done. It's not something that happens on a regular basis, but I just wanted to put that in there as a reminder. Ultimately, the board can set the meeting schedule, so I'll leave that up to the president to, field questions or discussion from the rest of the board.
Right, so let's open it for discussion. I would like to, entertain the idea of possibly the before or after. I think we've probably done 6:30 meetings half dozen times in the last 2 years, and those have worked out for said reasons that you explained. I personally like the Tuesdays, and they work in my schedule. I'm not saying another day wouldn't work, but they work for me, and but it's the way it's been for my 2 years or 10 years. So I guess I'll just open for discussion. Right?
So the Tuesday regular board meeting has probably been for decades. I only have 14 years' experience that I can speak to. But then the Tuesday, the third Tuesday is a committee of the whole, where all the different groups will report out. And that was started when Kevin came 8 years ago, where we started meeting. So we meet the second and fourth Tuesday of the months. Not every time there's a fourth. So you have the option to do variability, anything could change, but probably most likely that fourth Tuesday, if you say we don't like to do a committee of the whole, or you said maybe we'll try that. I think we do this annually. Is it annually that we vote the calendar in?
Yes.
Yeah. So it has worked. That's, that fourth Tuesday. And then the 6:30, as you've mentioned, it would depend if your work schedules would permit. Sometimes there's stuff that can be taken care of in closed session, which would make the time afterwards plausibly not necessary or much shorter?
And I think Laura brings up a great point. My experience with that has been sometimes we've saved, like Deanna had asked about a personnel packet. We may have a personnel matter, a student discipline matter, a collective negotiation matter. And if the meeting runs till 9 or 9:30, now you're going into closed session to talk about 3 really important items. And you're maybe not getting everybody's peak performance because they're coming from a long day of work and been sitting here for 2 hours, 2.5 hours. So knock on wood, maybe we won't have to use it that often, but Laura is right that sometimes if we have a larger issue or something that we want to dedicate a half hour to before the meeting, if we can get a majority of the board to attend, sometimes we can knock that out before the regular meeting.
So are we,
So I would like, this isn't about times. This is
Correct.
really about dates.
Dates.
This is a date thing.
Well, you're also consent, the times can fluctuate, but it is, for consistency to the community, it's good to have a standing time.
Yeah, I
as
mean,
well.
I like the time 7 o'clock, these dates, and then we can move our world around that, I think, but the vote is really, it's what the deciding is, these are the dates, we're gonna put it on the calendar at 7 o'clock so we can all organize our lives. That's really what this is about.
Well, but if we said 6:30, we'd be organizing our life at 6:30.
True that.
Yeah, I would just greatly appreciate keeping it on a Tuesday. I don't care if it's 6:30 or 7. I already set my school calendar for next year, so it would just make my life a little bit easier. I don't know how the other board members feel, but Tuesday works fantastic for me. So I would appreciate, I don't know, I know you were going to say something, Mona.
no, I was just
didn't
going to
pick
ask
up.
if it was more about the time or the date,
Oh.
because I think, again, like Laura says, Tuesday seems to be like, I mean, this is one
It
of those
works.
things where I don't feel like, well, we've always done it that way, we should do it that way. Like, this isn't one of those things where you should really debate that, right? Like, that's not, I mean, for me, it's not. But I was just wondering about the time, if we wanted to do the 6:30, like, I get off work at 3, right? So like, doesn't matter.
Okay, so I don't.
That's not my schedule either.
Yeah, right. Okay, I'm gonna have
So
a challenge with
7?
6:30.
No, okay.
7 o'clock is, I think, just
Okay, that's awesome.
much more, I'm coming from downtown.
Right.
Certainly 6:30, if there's a special extenuating circumstances, there is an architect in or something, I am flexible, I'm not trying to be
Right. No,
inflexible. But 7 o'clock is just
More.
more appropriate. Although I would suggest, and this is not obviously for this group of meetings, but maybe a year from now, I think some of the attendance we see here is perhaps because they're on Tuesday nights at 7 o'clock. So, once a year or twice a year, do a meeting on a Friday morning or something different. Not to be discussed now, but I'm just kind of putting it out there that in some cases, getting to a committee of the whole where you can get some more interest might be something worth considering.
True. I also remember all of our board meetings are taped and live, so sometimes I think some people, especially when the weather's bad, choose to watch it on RBTV.
Fair point, yes.
Because I will get several emails of like, hey, why did you do this? Why did you pay? So I do get feedback even though they're not maybe in attendance. But that is a good point.
Yeah, and I was just gonna basically echo that in terms of 7 o'clock. I mean, I have a downtown bias also, but I think the consistency with the community is something that I think is important, and also, it's sort of maybe the sweet spot between people getting home and having dinner or whatever, and then, obviously not later. But I'm in favor of keeping the regular start time at 7 o'clock also.
I'll just share, the meetings used to be at 7:30. And it was 8 years ago, or about 10 years ago, that they moved down to 7. So you're not, unheard because people are coming from downtown. And when I first started, we didn't have that fourth Tuesday. Those meetings were ad hoc when it was necessary to have a committee of a whole. So there are many models. When people become familiar with a model, they roll with that, but just to open that up, as you attend some West Cook meetings and talk to other board members, you can see what other people are doing in other districts.
Sure.
I encourage you to do that.
Any other discussion? All right, yeah, I'm in favor of the 7 o'clock. I travel a lot, it works for me. As many times I've come straight from the airport, slide into my seat, so
Someone like to read the resolution?
Resolved that the Board of Education Township High School District 208, Cook County, Illinois hereby affirms the regular and committee of the whole meeting dates for the 2019-2020 school board calendar as presented in the April 30th, 2019 board agenda packet.
Need a second? All right.
Second.
All right. Mary Ann?
Ms. Towner?
Yes.
Ms. Salas?
Yes.
Mr. Durkin?
Yes.
Ms. Ruska?
Yes.
Mr. Jacobs?
Yes.
Ms. Sierra?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes. All right, next we've got some bookkeeping things, authorization of signatories for impress account and financial reports.
The Assistant Superintendent and Superintendent are recommended signatories for the impressed account and financial reports for the 2019-20 school year. Again, this is done, a formality that is done annually. It just allows the two top officials in the district to have signature rights.
Resolved.
Any discussion?
Well, we would read it and then have discussion, right?
Okay.
Okay.
Resolved that the Board of Education Township High School District 208, Cook County, Illinois hereby affirms the authorization of the Assistant Superintendent and the Superintendent as signatories for the impressed account and financial reports for the 2019-2020 school year as presented in the April 30th, 2019 board agenda packet.
Okay, I'll second it.
I'll open for any discussion.
Got that, Mary Ann? I second it.
Discussion?
Any questions? Deanna, do you have questions? That's in your that's in your
No.
wheelhouse?
No questions.
Okay. Mary Ann?
Ms. Salas?
Yes.
Mr. Durkin?
Yes.
Ms. Ruska?
Yes.
Mr. Jacobs?
Yes.
Ms. Sierra?
Yes.
Ms. Towner?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes. All right, authorization of signatures for board in addition to president and secretary.
Again, a formality that's done annually. This gives the vice president as a signatory in addition to the president and the secretary. So there have been occasions where the president, as Mr. Jacobs mentioned earlier, the president's out of town, has a conflict of work or a family affair, and the vice president has to sit in for a meeting. So then we would need the vice president to sign, whatever the board approved, whether it's bills or checks or contracts or things like that.
Gina?
Resolved that the Board of Education Township High School District 208, Cook County, Illinois hereby affirms the authorization of Vice President as a signatory for the board in addition to the President and Secretary as presented in the April 30th, 2019 board agenda packet.
Need a second?
I'll second it.
Discussions? Left? Okay. Mary Ann?
Mr. Durkin?
Yes.
Ms. Ruska?
Yes.
Mr. Jacobs?
Yes.
Ms. Sierra?
Yes.
Ms. Towner?
Yes.
Ms. Salas?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes. Designation of district newspaper.
Again, formality done annually, so the school district is required to kind of identify 1 to 2 newspapers it uses for putting out its bids, putting out the public hearings on levy, public hearing on the tentative budget, public hearing on the budget. So what we have done is we use both the Suburban Life and Landmark to make sure that we're getting all aspects of the district.
All right, resolved that the Board of Education Township High School District 208, Cook County, Illinois hereby designates the Suburban Life newspaper and the Landmark newspaper as the newspapers of record for District 208 as presented in the April 30th, 2019 board agenda packet.
Second.
Second. Sorry.
Discussions? Left? Right?
Is there even another choice? I mean, I know there's lots of newspapers, but the ones that really pertain to the district, those are the two, correct?
That's why I did 2. A few years ago, we only used to do 1, so I ended up putting both, because what I'll do is I rotate, or if it's something like for bids and I feel there might be a little larger leadership with the Suburban Life, I try that.
Sure.
So that's why I asked for the authority to use both.
Mary Ann?
Ms. Ruska?
Yes.
Mr. Jacobs?
Yes.
Ms. Sierra?
Yes.
Ms. Towner?
Yes.
Ms. Salas?
Yes.
Mr. Durkin?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes. Designation of district depository.
Again, a formality, this is the First American Bank in Riverside, and so with the depository, this is where we do our deposits for student activities and any cash on hand, correct, Scott?
That is correct.
When cash is collected before we make a formal deposit to the Township Treasurer's Office. I think our accounts for, our student activity accounts, which are not part of the district budget and Township Treasurer's Office, are held at First American Bank.
Resolved that the Board of Education, Township High School District 208, Cook County, Illinois, hereby appoints the First American Bank, Riverside, Illinois, as the depository of record for District 208 as presented in the April 30th, 2019 Board Agenda Packet.
Second.
Second.
Second. Discussion to the right? Left. Mary Ann?
Mr. Jacobs?
Yes.
Ms. Sierra?
Yes.
Ms. Towner?
Yes.
Ms. Ellis?
Yes.
Mr. Durkin?
Yes.
Ms. Ruska?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes. And then we'll, Superintendent's Advisory Council.
So no action is needed on this item, but I wanted to make sure this was part of the organizational meeting. There was a practice in place when I became superintendent that the interim superintendent had used for 2 years. And at that time, the board suggested I consider using the superintendent advisory councils. So we have used superintendent advisory councils over the last 8 years. These do not necessarily replace Board of Education committees, but it does provide a level of flexibility for both the Board of Education as well as for the superintendent and administration. The idea of an advisory council is just that. There's no voting authority. It's strictly just to help advise the superintendent and the administration as we work on projects and tasks for the Board of Education. Now, what I've kind of done with these superintendent advisory councils is, to give you a kind of a flow chart of order, is I work on something with my cabinet or my senior leadership teams or the building level teams, and once I think we have our final draft, what I've done is I brought that to the advisory council. And my thinking on this is, I bring it and I present it to 2 board members. If 2 board members can get behind the motion, or if they have additional questions, or they feel like, I don't know if this is what the board was really looking for, I'd rather work through some of those things with my team in an advisory method so that I can go back to the drawing board and that I'm not wasting the board's time at the public meeting working through the kinks and the knots and some of those things. And so the idea behind this is I would show 2 board members, and hopefully once those 2 board members feel like they can support it at an advisory council level, then we bring it to a committee of the whole meeting and present it to the whole board. And then that board will have some time to chew on it both at the committee of the whole meeting and then the 2 weeks in between till the next meeting. So what I really try to do is so that we as a board don't vote on something until we have at least seen it twice. And those of you, and then whether it's the advisory council, we actually have seen it 3 times. And the logic behind that is like as we continue to grow together as a board, you'll begin to establish, where each other's strengths are at and how we're working through something. So when we come as an advisory council and present to you and we say, here's the things we worked out, or here, you'll give you a little more assurance that it was really vetted and genuine at a high level before we're bringing it to you to take action. So and all that will be provided in the background. I've created some tentative advisory councils. Now, the difference between an advisory council and a board committee is an advisory council, the superintendent asks board members to be a part of it, creates the agenda, takes the notes, and it's just more or less informational for the administration and the superintendent. If it was a board committee, the board president would appoint people to the committees. We'd have to follow the Open Meetings Act, have a posted agenda, posted notes, and things like that. I don't want you to think that we haven't used board committees. When we had some major projects like the stuff with the athletic complex across the street, we did a public facilities committee meeting. We did several public facility committee meetings where people were coming in and voicing their concerns about the parking lot, and we worked through some things and worked through some different design plans. We had presentations from the architects, the engineers. So when appropriate, the board historically has used committees as well. So in just looking at some things, I tried to use experience and as well as professional experience. I think one thing that's helped my tenure here as superintendent is being able to acknowledge the strengths of each of the individual board members and trying to use their professional expertise outside of the educational arena to help me make better decisions as your superintendent. So I talked to each individual board member a little bit, and based on some meetings and some general discussions and the information that was posted on you during the election time, I thought it would make some sense to establish the advisory councils for now like this. And we can discuss this at a later date. But I thought, Ms. Zales, with your background with the county, if you could serve on the finance council, maybe with Mr. Smithing. Ms. Haruska, with your seniority on the board, I would like to have you help Ms. Sierra and me on policy. And those are just reviewing policy manuals before we bring the drafts to the entire school board. And then Ms. Haruska, if you could also continue to serve on the curriculum from your years on that.
And I'll let the new board members know, before the people that just left, prior to that, about 8 years ago, the Illinois Association of School Boards came with the previous board before that and went through all the policy book that the high school had for decades. And so the policies that the school has now are what this, the Illinois Association of School Boards recommend, and then we have a service where they recommend updates or changes to the law or any of that. So that's how we became on a standard with the state about 8 years ago.
I have asked Mr. Durkin if you wouldn't mind being a member of the Personnel Council, Ms. Towner. And so what I will do with this is if we have any major hirings or recommendations or things I need to work through, or if there's any personnel matters of nature that may become extenuating where we may need to involve legal counsel or things like that, I may call you to bounce ideas off you or ask you to come in and meet and review some documents or things with me of that nature. And then facilities, Mr. Jacobs, I would like to tap into your expertise to join Mr. Smithing and I on the Facilities Council. And I try to respect all of your times. I know you have families and professional obligations on top of being at the board meetings for two. So honestly, maybe quarterly, sometimes only semi-annually, we'll have to have meetings depending on the things that are coming up or on the agendas. We may have a few more, probably more traditionally quarterly this first year as we all get more familiar with each other and the operations of the district. But it's not something where I'm calling you every 2 seconds. I may just send an email and ask you to read something or, send me back some feedback or have a cup of coffee with me. So, are there any questions for me in regards to the advisory council?
I was doing the liaison for West Cook. You still want me to?
Yeah, that's actually, the board has to, can suggest that because it's representing the board as the official nominee. But we can go through that before the next meeting and have that on there or continue to do that.
I just have to say with the facilities, or the councils, the advisory councils, I like the setup. I think it helps you get that little bit extra knowledge that you need for when you sit and do the whole board thing. So I think it works well.
I think it does. I think there are, as Kevin said, there's still room for committees for larger agendas and things we might think of as a board for sure. But, and definitely on the facility side, there's things we'll see 3, 4, 5 times, because we have questions about it.
Right.
And that's not right. Let's come back again. So it doesn't have to be 3 times, and sometimes it's more.
Right.
But
I use 3 as like, if you can see something 3
is.
times, it provides a good set of transparency.
But that's what the idea is, and certainly on the finance, when we get into budget, that's a bigger deal. But that's what it's designed to do, and then we can come to the board and really vet some things out.
Any other discussion?
So since we're not moving on this will this then be officially adopted at some point?
Well, it's technically can't be adopted because it's not a committee of the board.
Right.
It's technically my advisory councils, but I was trying to be as transparent. I wanted to do it in a public meeting to say, here's what I've kind of thought about in regards to your expertise and what I've talked to you guys about. And if somebody said, hey, I really don't want to do finance. I do it all day at work. I don't want to do it. Okay, then we would, I could work on it, but it doesn't seem like anybody's got concerns right now. Okay?
And feel free, if you do have concerns, let me know. We'll, we'll work through that.
Yep.